Welcome to The Human Element, presented by Whisk. I'm your host, Barb Bidan, and in each episode, I sit down with CHROs and senior HR leaders to explore how AI, innovation, and human insight are reshaping the future of HR. We'll explore how technology is reshaping leadership, strategy, and the role of HR by sharing candid stories, practical ideas, and strategic perspectives to help you shape the future. The Human Element is brought to you by Whisk, the leader in agentic HR and creator of Harper, the world's first AI HR generalist. Learn how Harper can resolve up to 80% of routine HR tasks autonomously. Learn more about Whisk at whisk.com. My guest today is Q Hamirani, the Chief People Officer at HighLevel. Q is a builder and an experimenter at heart. He spent nearly 5 years at Airbnb as their first global people operations leader, where he incubated and designed the Live and Work Anywhere program. He also guided the company through hypergrowth, a pandemic, workforce restructuring, and an IPO. So just a few really major things. He went on to serve as the Chief People and Communications Officer at Paper, a Series D edtech company backed by SoftBank and IVP. And today, Q leads the people function at HighLevel, a 2,000 plus person, fully remote AI company that is growing at a remarkable pace. He has also founded numerous companies, is a Forbes contributor, guest faculty at the London School of Business, and a repeat speaker at some of the biggest stages in HR, including Transform, where you were just on stage for a panel called Digital Teammates, where AI agents fit on the org chart. So I think we're going to dig into that. It was a great Transform this year. So that's exactly where we're going to go today, Q. So welcome to The Human Element, and thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, I started your introduction by talking about all the great things that you've built. So people functions at scale across some really recognizable names, right? In tech, edtech, Airbnb, Paper, HighLevel now. Tell us more about your career arc. What drew you into the work, and how has your thinking about people strategy evolved as AI has entered the picture?
Yeah, first off, thanks for the kind intro. In terms of my career arc, I think I really backed into the people function from an engineering mindset. What I mean from that is, so I studied electrical engineering way back in college, and I've never worked in engineering, but I've applied all the things that I've learned in terms of dealing with ambiguity, systems thinking, first principles, really questioning the why on everything I do. And the first 7 years in my career in terms of the arc was not in the people function. I started off working for CFOs and CEOs, doing digital workforce transformations, then worked in some global strategy and ops in-house, then ran 3 of my own companies. And that's at that point, I realized there was only one key to success and one key to failure every single time. And it was the people, right? And to me, coming from an engineering mindset as well, I found that the hardest thing in an organization is not necessarily the code base or the product, it's the people, right? The people can change the way work gets done, and that can impact your best product or your best process or your best technology. So I set out mid-career to work in the people function. And I've been doing that for 15 years now. And it's really been grounded in the arc of why do we do what we do? And how do we kind of shift from the mindset of making policies to reducing friction so that the operating system of how work gets done can be more fluid, because that's when you see people being their best and working together and helping navigate through that. So it's been a fun journey, I think, especially in the last 6 months or even 24 months or last few years, because technology through AI has brought it full circle for me. Right. So when I started in engineering and then I was kind of got into HR technology and analytics maybe 14, 15 years ago, the world was a very different place in terms of the skills and to be able to build and code. Right. I did not do engineering through my career, so I'd lost touch with how to code. And honestly, one of the interesting fun facts is I actually did electrical engineering back in college because I did not like to code. I did not like to learn syntax of C++, Java. I just wanted to build stuff, break stuff, try to make it better and do things. And now with AI, all of a sudden, 25 years later, I feel like I can code and I can build without having to have gone down the path of understanding and learning a lot of syntax because of the way white coding and all that stuff is now. So it's really interesting because I think us as people leaders, including myself now, are living in a world where we have the ability to build and prototype. Production ready at scale is a different kind of ball game, and there's obviously some variables there. But we have the ability to build, be creative, build different modalities, be it voice to speech to anything, in a way that we could not do before. And what that does to us is it gives us almost superpowers in a way to enable employees and our organization to be their best. And in turn, go back to what I started off with, is to operate in a more fluid, dynamic, and trusting environment so that they can all do their great work. Because at the end of the day, we're here to just make sure work gets done. And in a world where we are today, we can enable that with not only less need for dependencies, be it resources, but also the extra modalities of being creative and hitting, in everyone in a personalized way, because there's no one size fits all, as we know in our career, and you can never please everyone, but you have to do your best to try to resonate and relate with everyone. So that's a little bit about full circle, I would say, on the technology front, for myself at least.
A very full circle. Sounds like you picked the right type of engineering back in college, right? So you didn't want to understand syntax, but you did learn to understand systems, right? In an electrical engineering degree, and like sort of think of the whole system, or the system as a whole, which sounds a lot like what you're talking about there. So I was at Transform this year. You were at Transform this year. You were just on stage doing the digital teammates, where AI agents fit into the org chart. So that framing, I'm super interested in, right? A teammate, not a tool, is doing a lot of the work. Talk to me about what that actually means to give an AI agent a role inside of an organization.
Yeah, I think more recently in the last 12 months, with AI helping us do work in an agentic form, meaning we have agents that can do work beside us, I think it's changed the game of thinking of AI more as a tool that you just kind of implement and, install, for lack of better words, and, use, versus more being a teammate that helps you with decision making along the way. Right. So even when that construct changes or is additive, because you still have AI and technology that can just go do work for you, right? There's automations that, no one likes posting a requisition in whichever tool you use, right? If you could automate that, that's great. So there's still the automation part of it, but now there is an additive part of it, which is how can it be part of the decision making with you? So a simple example is if you're doing analytics and you're analyzing data now, you don't need necessarily a whole team dedicated just to doing analytics, absorbing all the data, because you can instantly almost do it with the right tool set. That analytics is going to help you with almost relatively more real-time decision making to build and iterate and figure out what resonates and what does not. So we have to think of now AI or technology in this wave as being both a teammate and doing work for us. So one of the things we talk about is how can AI do work for you? Example, things like automations and things that you want to test it, give it guardrails, but then just let it do it for you. And then how can AI work with you? Right. So when you think of that, the construct of a teammate, the construct of how do you onboard a teammate now that's a digital teammate, right? And I think the part that I've kind of continued to focus on is even if you have AI as a teammate, the human is the one that needs to be accountable and responsible for that teammate. What do I mean by that? When we thinking of AI as a teammate, we need to think of, in a loose form, what is the job description? I'm not saying we need to go write the job description and, do the whole 9 yards, but we have to think of, okay, in this context, what am I expecting AI to help me with? How am I going to hold the AI accountable? Because at the end of the day, if the AI hallucinates or does something off, it's the human. It should be the human's responsibility to make those critical decisions, whether they're using the data that they're getting or how they're interpreting it or what the context or the heart is to that context when you see data about people. So I think it's really a new difference now, or a new wave, I would say. Which is how do we think of how it sits into the orchestration of the team, the work, the responsibility, and how do you onboard them? It's not an installation button anymore. Not that it was, but just to make a point and oversimplify it, it's now more how is it going to be there and grow. And the beauty of this technology is it learns with you. It stores memory. It's reminding you of things that you may have asked or done 6 months ago in a context that's really, really powerful. So yeah, it's more a digital teammate in addition to being kind of doing the work in an automation form. This is an added dimension that changes the construct to how we need to look at it as well and leverage and use it.
Completely. I love the idea of like the teammate working with you or for you versus a tool, right? Which in some way is like alongside you, separate and apart in a different way than what than what I hear you describing.
Exactly. It's totally.
So when you think about how you define the scope of what a digital teammate owns versus what it can assist with, how are you thinking about differentiating and where maybe to insert the human operator in that process?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. I mean, my general rule is pretty simple. There always needs to be a human owner of the outcome that's being produced by the mix of technology or the mix of human in the loop. Meaning, you cannot just blame the AI agent, right? So when I think of it, I think of what are we trying to solve for? Be it, maybe we're in hypergrowth and we're solving for hiring as quickly as we can in a very competitive market. And maybe one of the bottlenecks could be we need real-time compensation data, or we need to figure out how to get to market quicker and stay on that leading edge, because sometimes you're defining the market data versus getting it on a lag, right? So when I look at the outcome, I first try to think of what do we need help with and what do we not kind of necessarily need help with. And this has come from kind of experience on, I've gone down the path numerous times, especially when in 2023 or 2024, when AI was kind of new and it was growing pretty quick, where I would try to build an AI solution for something only to realize I did not even need it. I did not even need a solution necessarily if I just had the right judgments put in the loop of the process. So I would say like, I really think of it on how do you look at the outcome, try to see what is inhibiting us from getting to that outcome to improve that fluidity and dynamic nature of operational work getting done. What is slowing us down with getting work done? And what is, I often tell some of my teammates, what is the worst part of your day? Like, what do you hate doing?
Yep.
Right? That's a good, easy win to start off with. Either what do you hate about it? Like maybe it's something you hate doing, or it's something you hate waiting on because you have a dependency in order to get your work done. And then I think if you focus on the outcome, you can orchestrate kind of that mix. And I think the biggest thing in this world that we are today is, you have to have that agility to pivot and realize when it's, like to my comment earlier, when it's really not even a use case for AI, but you thought it may be, so there's no harm in trying it. So really being able to pivot, having the agility to say, okay, I'm going to try this. And the beauty of it today is I often run into this, which is I feel like I can try things with AI that I would not have even thought of trying before. Because the sky has almost become the limit, which is good and bad. There's the good side of it where we can kind of push the limits. We can try to do things that we could not do before. The dark side of that is, it is a toll on the human mind and the human body, right? Because you can only do so much. The biggest capacity constraint we have today in a world of AI is not the technology. The technologies are getting commoditized. Data is getting pretty much infinite, almost like you can get everything at your fingertips. The biggest capacity constraint is humans. It's our nervous system. It's how much can we take on from a cognitive perspective to make sure we can create this orchestration. Because my firm belief has always been and is continuing to be, which is that what humans can do in terms of judgment, in terms of making that right orchestration layer to get the right outcome of work, can only be done by humans. So now the biggest bottleneck is us, right? And how do we make sure we balance that both for the outcome and for our own, state of mind, and not to race too quick? Because in a world where the world and the ground underneath is moving so quick with new tools every month, new modalities, it's tempting to move really quick. And that's what I did for the first year or two. Now it's actually what I found is the moat is really trying to keep the calm in that chaos and prioritizing where I should try something and where I should not. And sometimes it's 15 minutes of prototyping and scrapping. Sometimes it's, longer. So it's really, that builder mindset. It reminds me of sitting in a lab, in college and trying to build circuits, blowing a resistor, blowing a capacitor, trying it a different way, and then say, gosh, I got the circuit to actually work, right? And it's that iterative process within bounds.
Yeah, I mean, that's the fun within it. And I want to go back to something you said a minute ago, because it really resonated with me. You said that you have tried some things with AI that you just wouldn't have thought to try before. Maybe you didn't think were possible or what. Can you elaborate on that? Or I would love to hear something that you've tried with AI that maybe just didn't even cross your mind to do before.
Yeah. I mean, I think one example is I've always wanted to be creative in terms of expressing something in multi-modalities. And as much as I try to think of it music and stuff, I'm not very talented to be artistic in that form. With AI, what we've done is, so a simple example is, say you have, let's say, an engagement survey, a lot of information that you've gathered, including benchmarking. You typically have the decks that you create, you walk through it with everyone, you action plan. All that is good. And I'm not saying that needs to be scrapped, but now you have an additive layer that you can use with AI to reach people that may digest information in different forms. So an example is you could take all those multiple documents, put it in any tool. One we used last year was Notebook LM because it had just come out then. And it created a 6-minute podcast of two professionals talking about our company results relative to benchmarking, and you can share it with people. Right? You can now spin up a quick website that basically will have not only the survey data, if I take that same example, but in an interactive format where people can drill down. You're no longer dependent on your HR tech stack to communicate and drive adoption, because we all know in a world where we all work in every day, there are just pain points with the tech stack because they're not built to resonate with every single persona and for every single module. They do their core job really well. It's like the engine of the car. So you can now spin up apps, you can spin up websites. So multi-modality is what we've done, like just, audio, websites, simulations of change management. So change management now, which is really the core part of our job, because if you can drive change management really well, you can come back to what I always come back to, which is have work be done in a more fluid and dynamic way. And if work is done more seamlessly in an environment where people have the underlying form of trust and understanding of why they're doing something or why you rolled out a program that probably won't make sense to them it'll make sense to us as HR professionals, but not to them. I think you can just reach so much more people and drive the adoption. So multimodality is just one from ways we've tried it. And now I just, kind of go to it. Another good example is also I've created songs that incorporate our company values and who we are. And the entire thing from lyrics to production to post-production is all done with various AI tools. And yes, I had the idea on how to do things, but in my past, I didn't have the ability to learn and integrate the tools. And this is another way, sound, audio, interacting apps. So it's definitely the sky's the limit, which is exciting, but can be nerve-wracking sometimes too.
No, I mean, so fun, right? And it's like, even if you would have had the idea with some of those creative elements previously, the time that it would have taken pre-AI, it's not like our teams aren't staffed to be able to kind of dive in those ways. And I can feel your energy when you're talking about that level of experimentation. For those of us who have been, doing this work for 20 years or so, it doesn't even need to be that long. The things that we have not been able to do, that's why I think there's so much excitement, in particular with CHROs who are in this stage of career, all the stuff that you wanted to do but couldn't always get to, the sky really is the limit. So I feel you on that completely. So I'm gonna shift back to, you talked about accountability and who is accountable the human being the accountable party for the outcome. But one of the hardest parts of integrating AI into a people function might actually be accountability, right? Who owns the outcome when an AI agent is involved in hiring, performance, screening when it comes to hiring, or employee communication? So how do you set up that human level of accountability that you talked about before so things don't become a black hole where humans have no awareness? Like hiring comes to mind in particular here. But.
Yeah. Yeah, and we can take hiring as that example to kind of build on. I think the fundamental blocks of accountability do not change in an AI or non-AI world. Meaning, if we have, let's just say, since we're taking hiring as an example, we have a recruiter that's in charge of a rec or their manager, like you have the leaders in charge of hiring. If they use tools like for scheduling or any of the AI tools internally, at the end of the day, when we're giving an offer to someone, they have spoken with hopefully more than one human along the way.
Yes.
And that judgment is on us, right? And hiring is an interesting one because hiring is never foolproof, right? Like it's never, and I tell leaders that like you can never guarantee it, but you can do your best to get data points along the way. So I think this is an example of, even if we didn't have AI, the same person was responsible for it, or the same role was responsible for it. Even if you have AI and the AI may be doing work for that role, like let's say scheduling gets automated with AI tools, or the AI may be helping in the decision making by doing work with the recruiter in this example, or the hiring manager to provide more data points. The decision at the end of the day is with the human. And that's how I look at every single process, right? Be it benefits or be it compensation, wherever we're using tools. Like we've used a good amount of AI to do compensation analysis because that is a very good use case for it. But one of the things I learned earlier when I was building out the model was, the AI tool would just go off and do all the analysis and give me a number at the end of it. And I had to train it to say, do not do that. Like stop. Yeah. I had 3 stops in there to say, stop and validate, for example, the internal leveling. Stop and validate the job code you picked from Bradford or from the right database. Stop and validate that this is accurate for what you're looking for. And by building those, you can help the human be responsible. So it's really that, to your comment on the black box, I feel happens and did happen early on when I was testing things, was because I let it do too much, almost end to end. So if you do blocks of it, you make sure you're comfortable with that block in terms of interjecting the human in the loop or setting guardrails. Like I would tell it, right out initially when things came up where, they could browse the web to give us information. That feels like decades ago, but I think that was like maybe a year or 15 months ago, because initially when ChatGPT and all these tools came out, they couldn't browse the web, and then they turned on the web. I learned when I was doing some of my testing was that I wanted to turn that off because I wanted to only reference my data set and not the web. So as you build blocks and you refine them with the right guardrails and humans in the loop, then you can almost think of it as a Lego concept of you building the blocks to a big process. And within those are baked the humans in the loop with the right accountability. Because at the end of the day, like, AI is not completely a compliance problem. Yes, there's a compliance lens to it that I do not want to minimize. AI is really a cultural problem. It's how people are doing work. And if they don't take accountability or want to take, and it's honestly, I'll go a step further to say, if folks are not taking accountability now for a particular process, my guess is they weren't taking accountability prior either. So it's really just highlighting the need for accountability, because if things go wrong, it has a bigger impact now, because just blaming your AI agent is not an acceptable form, from my lens at least.
Completely. I think that I asked the question as the black hole, but as you were talking, I was going, it's really talking about having work not be a black box. And then you said it. I had a bit of a tangent, but as you were talking, my reflection was, we've been talking a lot about how we're going to bring sort of the newest set of graduates out of college and teach them. Mm-hmm. And will they have jobs if AI is doing everything? And I believe that they will. But actually what you're describing is another great way for this sort of incoming like entrance to the market, the newest college grads and so forth to learn is by not setting things up to be a black box, right? The AI makes you faster, but you have stops along the way where you learn alongside of it what it was doing to get you to that point. You validate, you step it forward, or you do it in your design if you don't want to kind of, stop it all the time along the way. But I think that's also going to be pretty critical to how we train folks and make sure that people still know things, right? About like HR and the profession. So
totally.
Completely. So the panel description that was used at Transform was actually talking about establishing collaboration norms between humans and AI. What does that mean for you in practice? And how is describing like the interplay between humans and AI different than just like writing a policy, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of almost version 2.0 of an SOP or a standard operating procedure, because when you have AI doing things and you have the human in the loop, one thing that we've dealt with in the entire working kind of history is, how do you deal with when folks transition or when new folks are getting onboarded? How do they get integrated into learning that that overall process? So for us, it's really having that level of almost racy roles and responsibilities and accountabilities, all kind of built as though it's been done with collaborative digital and human teammates. And I think you just have to work through and document that so that onboarding becomes clearer. And then you have to continuously learn and iterate. So, as the tools get stronger, as you expand that box to become, I love now that we're talking, like I just started doing Legos with my 5-year-old son, and it's very, very similar. Like you build a piece of it, you work it, and then Legos come with an instruction manual that you have to like at least use directionally to go in some direction. So you need that instruction manual, which tells you how you're orchestrating that job or that process. And then for our world, it is got real repercussions on compliance, be it data privacy or how we're using the data. It's got direct impact on people's lives, if it's benefits or pay. So we have to also make sure that, we are slowly and cautiously expanding that block in domains where we know we have flexibility, like the example I talked about of creatively trying to express survey results with multi-modalities. You can be a lot more flexible and try with that versus payroll, for example, right? But every process can be done if you have the right control. So I would say just kind of going back to the basics of making sure there is a collective process documentation that's being followed. And the beauty of it today is you can tell AI to create the draft. It's 70% there, and then you got to tweak it. And you can tell it to remind you to maintain it, or every time there's a change, go and update it. So we have the tools, but this is kind of what I come back to. The orchestration of it and management of it needs judgment and context, which only humans, especially in our profession, can do best. So we have to make sure we empower the humans, hold them accountable, and give them grace. Right? I made mistakes when I was playing but it was in domains where I was being cognizant of not impacting people's lives. And you have to give yourself grace. You have to give your team grace. You have to give that experimentation sandbox environment. So be it give everyone the right AI tools that are kind of controlled in your enterprise settings, so they can put sensitive information and it'll be contained so they can play with. You have to help folks, including yourself and your team, and give grace, because that is, again, something I think humans will be best at identifying and doing.
Yeah. So you've described what getting it right looks like, right? Some level of like governance around it, having the right infrastructure, like allowing for learning within the system, right? Like failure and learning from failure. What does getting it wrong look like? Like, what are the early warning signs, do you think, that AI integration might be complicating things within teams rather than enhancing it, or other ways we might get it wrong?
Yeah, so there's kind of two thoughts that come to mind on this. One, if you get it wrong, you lose credibility and trust very quick if you go too quick, right? So you have to be cautious on not just impacting people's lives, if it's benefits or payroll, just as an example, but if it goes wrong, you're losing trust and credibility very quick, and then you got to rebuild it, which takes longer to do in general. So I would say the cost of going wrong can be very, very dangerous. The second point I would say is the part that I think being the reason for why people might get it wrong is people are trying to implement AI without redesigning how the work or the process gets done. right? And it's simple, in other words, people are trying to bolt on things onto an existing process that may already be broken, right?
And wondering
Or
why it doesn't get better, like from the
why,
AI.
yeah,
Like it's not going to get better. Yeah.
wondering why it does not get better, or also that is exposing the failure points.
Yeah.
Right. So then things go wrong. To your point, if things go wrong, it's easy to blame AI, but that may not be the root cause. Because the way you solve with AI is you're fixing a symptom and not a root cause to begin with. Right. So I think that's the biggest trap I feel like I fell into early on, and I see people doing now, is bolting on AI without really re-architecting the process, which means the people, the entire orchestration of that work. And then you don't make as much headway, you don't get the ROIs you wanted, and you look at it as a failure, or you reduce trust because the process has just gone wrong. So I think it can go wrong in various ways, but that should not stop us from exploring, because if we don't, the flip side of that is we stagnate. And if we stagnate, the world is going to shift so quickly around us that we will be left with poor inputs to make the judgment that we are the best at doing as humans.
Right. So like, don't be afraid of it. Continue to experiment. But a surefire symptom of something going wrong is if you are just finding that things are going wrong, but faster, then maybe you didn't start with the work, right? And correcting sort of like how should the work be before like slapping an AI tool on top of it.
Exactly.
So we've talked about that a ton in the show, right? Like starting with the work, not like, and is the work happening in the right way? Like, is the process right? Do we do this well from the beginning? Because it really is about experimentation. But I'm going to pull us into the lightning round. So some quick hit questions to kind of bring us to a close here. So what is one function within HR, the people department, that you would fully hand to an AI agent tomorrow, if you could? I
would say analytics or digesting a lot of information. I would hand that to the AI, but that would be the digestion and creating outputs, but then the human would still need to do the judgment call on it. I love it. I was going to throw your caveat on there at the end if you didn't, because that was a hard question, because technically the answer is nothing would get fully handed to the AI agent completely tomorrow. The human would be there to own the outcome, as you've said a few times in our conversation. So finish this sentence for me. The risk is not deploying AI agents. It's outsourcing the thinking. How would you add on or extend that thought? I would say our job in our profession is not to implement AI. It's really to figure out where the humans sit in the AI construct. So in other words, our job is to humanize AI at work. That's what I would add on to that. Excellent. So what I endeavor to do at the end of every episode, and I was writing frantically here, as I usually do, is try to recap some of my key takeaways from our conversation. So just as you are an engineer, I think we all could benefit from the takeaway of like thinking like an engineer and starting with understanding the why. I think that forces you back to starting with the work. So I liked sort of that tie out. And I mean, should be no surprise to people leaders, but always worth a mention. The one key to success or failure every time in everything is the people. And so starting also with the human aspect of where we're headed here, from change management to keeping a human as the owner of the outcome, et cetera. And then probably the sort of something that was central to our conversation and came up in a couple of different ways is AI as a teammate versus a tool. So I got a few interesting takeaways here, right? A teammate is someone that you onboard, right? A teammate is someone that works with you or for you. A tool might be more on the side. And a tool, a tool is something you pick up, right? And a teammate is something you onboard. Exactly. If you just think about that differently, that is key. And then, of course, something I just recapped in that last bit is that the human owns the outcome. The outcome is owned by the person. It's like a better way, I think, of like human in the loop. I mean, everyone's sick of hearing that phrase. But so how about just humans own the outcome, right? AI helps us to own the outcomes faster, better, et cetera. So I always give guests, though, the very last word, Q. So what do you want the HR leader who just listened to us chat today to go and think about on the rest of their drive home today? Yeah, I would say just focus on starting small and building the blocks to a bigger process or pain point. And just keep in mind the one thing that I just said again, because I feel like that's the most impactful, is your job is not to use and implement AI. It is actually to decide what stays human in the AI world for all of us. And we are the best at it. The AI might digest data, might give us data. AI is never going to be able to, in my view, read the room and make the right critical judgment of what needs to be done next completely autonomously. So we have the power. Let's remember that, and let's figure out how to kind of orchestrate in a world where we can all coexist and just amplify our own power and capability to drive the business forward.
I love that framing. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today, Q.
Thank you for having me. And
of course.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on The Human Element, presented by Whisk. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow The Human Element wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Barb Bidan. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.